Hello, everybody. Welcome. Hi, y'all. Is this on? I am so glad that you all are here. I'm not on. I'm supposed to be on. Am I on now? Wow. I might as well use my loud voice. Can you hear me? Okay. Hi, I'm Lisa Downing. Laptop. Okay. I'm Lisa Downing, and I'm with the Adult Ed Committee. And from the chatter I'm hearing from the seats, I can tell a lot of you have not seen each other in a while, and you're glad to be here and the swarm around Rabbi Bernstein. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So this promises to be a very informative and entertaining afternoon. And to make it worth your while, we are going to recognize our guests here on the PIMA, not just by peppering them with personal questions, but right after we conclude, we all are going to go out the front doors of the sanctuary, gather, and lift a cup of bubbly and toast to thank these outstanding women for what they've done for TRS and the reform movement. Okay? So just so that you know, you have something else to look forward to. This is an interesting panel. You know most of them. I will start by introducing the panelists and then our moderator. Now, I have this special sheet here that none of you have, but this sheet is online on our website. And because of that, we were asked by the Sustainability Committee, properly so, to not make other paper copies of it, since it is online and we are being responsible. Okay? I'm getting some yays. So I get to read this verbatim. Senior Rabbi Amy. Hello. Amy Schwartzman was born and reared in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Okay. She received her Master's of Hebrew Literature in 1988, and she was ordained in 1990 from the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion in New York City. Following ordination, she joined us as our temple's first assistant rabbi and became our first associate rabbi after that. In June 1998, following the retirement of Rabbi Berkowitz, Rabbi Schwartzman was installed as senior rabbi of Rodef Shalom, giving Temple Rodef Shalom the distinction of being one of the largest congregations headed by a woman rabbi. Rabbi Schwartzman is involved in the leadership of many Jewish organizations and has served on the executive board of the Central Conference of American Rabbis, the CCAR, and co-coordinated the Women's Rabbi Network of Reform Judaism. She has also worked with many community organizations, including the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice, many national and local housing organizations, and has been active in community AIDS projects. Rabbi Schwartzman is married to environmentalist Kevin Moss and is the mom of Hannah and Eliana Moss. You didn't know all that about her, did you? Ah. Okay. Rabbi Stephanie Bernstein, who has retired from serving TRS in the official capacity, is a native of Duluth, Minnesota. Who else knows about, who's the other less famous native of Duluth? Of Minnesota.
Me too.
Yeah.
And Cantor Richard Rhodes was born in Minnesota.
That's right. That's right, there you go. She received her rabbinic ordination from Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion in May 2009. Prior to her ordination, Rabbi Bernstein was a clinical social worker for over 20 years and served as president of Temple Sinai in Washington, D.C. Rabbi Bernstein was a rabbi here at TRS from 2012 to 2022. She was on the staff of the Union for Reform Judaism, teaching and coordinating Introduction to Judaism classes in the greater Washington area. As an aside, that's how I met her. Rabbi Bernstein was a study guide writer for the Torah, a woman's commentary, and served as a chaplain with Jewish Social Services. She has served on the boards of directors of the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Washington, Jews United for Justice, and was the board chair of Equality Maryland. Rabbi Bernstein is a chaplain now with the Metropolitan Police Department of Washington, D.C. Yeah, so she hasn't stopped. Rabbi Bernstein is married to Henry Winokur and is the mother of Sarah Bernstein and Joseph Bernstein, and the proud grandmother of Michael David Berry, Keon Leo Bernstein, and Adi Nima Bernstein. That's the most important. The role, once you graduate to being a grandmother, come on, there you got it. Next in line, we have, yes, Cantor Rachel Rhodes, who arrived at TRS in 2014 as the first full-time associate cantor. She grew up in Boulder, Colorado, after being born in Minneapolis and attended Indiana University for her undergraduate education, majoring in Jewish studies and music. She was ordained from HUC JIR in May of 2014 after completing her thesis on inspiring a Jewish environmental movement through music, and gave a recital on that topic as part of her ordination requirements. She is deeply involved with the rich life and activities of the clergy team, and additionally serves as the clergy liaison to the Youth Committee, Music and Performing Arts Committee, and the Environmental Stewardship Team. She conducts Sure Harmony, our youth choir for grades 3 to 6, works with our adult choir, Kolenu, and our Kai Notes congregational band. She has taught adjunct classes at her alma mater, the Hebrew Union College, and is an active member of the American Conference of Cantors, and many of us were lucky enough to hear her belt out the national anthem at the Nats game last summer. Oh man, that was beautiful. Look it up. Cantor Rhodes lives in McLean with her husband, Dov, and her 2 sons, Oren and Lev. Yay! Our recent addition, coming up on 1 year of being here, Rabbi Alexandra Stein. She grew up in D.C. as an active member of Temple Sinai. There it pops up again. She was moved by her community's dedication to social justice work and was left with the impression that a huge part of Judaism's power is that it compels us to work for justice, healing, and love, both interpersonally and systemically. She went to college at Yale. When she,
Sorry, I struck parts of this bio. And
yeah.
the major was women's gender and sexuality studies.
Women's gender and sexuality studies. And then, and then down here. Rabbi Stein's experiences include a year as a participant in Avodah's Jewish Service Corps and case associate on the counseling team of a therapeutic high school in Brooklyn. A year studying conflict resolution in Tel Aviv, and 3 years working with neurodiverse young adults transitioning to independent living in Rockville. Now we get down to the addition. While in rabbinical school, she served for 3 years as the student rabbi at Congregation Beth Emeth in Albany, New York, and she also participated in fellowships with Teruah and the New Israel Fund. She was ordained in May 2002 at the Hebrew... 2022. I need a cookie. Another alum of the Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion in New York, and joined TRS last July. Our moderator today is Cherry Arts. Cherry Arts. She's a past president of TRS, for those of you who are new here. Yes. Yes. She did make a difference. And she has a varied history of her own in that she was a teacher and a social worker, and then she decided to make the not so big bucks by being a lawyer, but not get the big bucks by being a lawyer. You don't go from being a teacher and a social worker and then go corporate. So this is a person who worked and lived her Jewishness. Also, she couldn't help it because she's the granddaughter of 2 rabbis. And there are so many rabbis in her community, in her family, that it's beyond writing down all the different rebs. You grew up, Orthodox and then conservative, and kind of felt your way over to...
Theologically, it feels correct.
Yes, and that's it. Theologically, we have to be where we feel we are needed, wanted, and our heart is. Enough of my sermonizing. I give you Sherry.
Lisa, thank you for your lovely introductions and for inviting me to be here today. It is indeed an honor to moderate this panel of our esteemed women of the Bima. I'd like to begin with a very brief introduction of the history of women on the Bima. As we all know, because we're here today, in the past 50 years, the face of clergy leadership in this country has changed dramatically. In June of 1972, our reform movement, our movement's Hebrew Union College, ordained the first female rabbi in America, her name Rabbi Sally Priesand. As was noted in last year's Hadassah's Spring magazine, Rabbi Priesand's ordination did not begin a revolution, as some had hoped and others had feared. Instead of a revolution, it became an evolution of Jewish congregational leadership. Today, the balance of men and women is nearly equal in the Reform Rabbinate. Within 50 years of Rabbi Priesand's ordination, more than 1,500 women have been ordained across all of the movements in the Jewish world, and more than half of these women by the Reform movement. HUC was founded in 1875, 150 years ago. It was nearly 100 years later before it ordained a female rabbi, but that wasn't the first time it was confronted with the issue. it had been confronted with the decision of whether to ordain a woman rabbi long before it ordained Rabbi Prezant. Had the first woman who sought ordination from HUC been ordained, we might now be celebrating 100 years of women on the Bema. In 1921, when confronted with a third-year female student who wanted a high holiday pulpit, HUC's Board of Governors actually expressly made a decision to, reinforcing its policy to restrict ordination to men. In 1950, after the Hebrew Union College merged with New York's Jewish Institute of Religion, hence HUC-JIR, after that merger, it again was confronted with the decision of whether it would ordain women, and again it said the time was not yet ripe. Be that as it may, the fact remains that our reform movement did ordain Rabbi Prezant and hundreds of other women in the past 50 years. Significantly, other movements followed suit. In 1974, 2 years after Rabbi Prezant was ordained, the Reconstructionist movement ordained its first woman rabbi. In 1985, 13 years after Rabbi Prezant was ordained, the conservative movement ordained its first woman rabbi. And almost half a century after Rabbi Prezant was ordained in 2015, even the Orthodox movement ordained its first woman rabbi. Interestingly, since the mid-1970s, women have been ordained as rabbis throughout Europe. In fact, the very first rabbi to be ordained, not by an institution, but by an individual mentor rabbi, was in 1935 in Germany. And unfortunately, she could not be the clergy of a congregation, as we know. It was traditional Judaism, but she could teach Torah, and she gave sermons, and she actually was very helpful in helping the people who were being rounded up by the Nazis and comforting them. Unfortunately, she was sent to Theresen in 1942, and in 1944 she was murdered at Auschwitz. I'm relying on my cell phone. I'm really not sending texts. But my printer refused to work today, so lucky one of you wasn't called up to print for me. Okay. The history of ordination of cantors is somewhat similar to that of rabbis. Women, however, were commonly heard singing on liberal pulpits long before they were ordained. In fact, women were on liberal pulpits since the early 20th century. They were referred to then merely as cantorial soloists, song leaders, whatever. But they were not thought of as members of the clergy. They were not considered cantors. Even though women had been singing on the pulpit for years before HUC's School of Sacred Music was founded in 1948, it didn't invest as a woman cantor until 1975, which was 3 years after the first rabbi was ordained. Oh. Okay, I don't know. Just as in the case of rabbis, the conservative movement began to ordain cantors after the Reform movement acted. In 1988, it opened its cantorial school and ordained its first woman cantor in 1987. Again, the Reform movement led the way by about 12 years. Because of certain halachic injunctions regarding a woman's place in Torah services, it seems to me unlikely that the Orthodox movement will ever ordain a cantor. Women rabbis and cantors have had a tremendous impact on the practice of Judaism. Today, not only is gender-inclusive language the norm in all liberal denominations, in prayer books, Jewish libraries are filled with Torah commentaries written by women rabbis reflecting perspectives of women's life experiences, enriching our understandings and enhancing inclusiveness in our practice. In addition, women rabbis and cantors have added a new dimension to traditional sermons. To some extent, if you will, Rabbi Schwartzman, they have kintsugied the Devar kintsugied the Devar Torah, Divrei Torah, often presenting them in a new light. They have added new approaches to lifestyle events, as well as grievance and pastoral counseling. Moreover, women clergy have had a true impact on the culture of synagogue leadership by focusing on work-life issues. Despite the tremendous move forward for female clergy in the past 50 years, certain challenges concerning pay disparities between men and women clergy members, as well as matters of harassment, discrimination, and family leave issues are continuing to be addressed in most of the Jewish movements. Before hearing from our panelists, I'd like to point out that HUC has 4 campuses, and its course of study for rabbis and cantors is 5 years, including the first year at the Jerusalem campus. As Lisa had said, after completing their first year in Israel, all of our panelists attended the HUC campus in New York, close to NYU at Washington Square, sorry. Circle is in DC, Square is, yeah. Now let's hear from our women on the pulpit, and here they are. Your ordinations spanned over 30 years, from 1990 to, I know we'd like to say 2002, but it was 2022. It would be interesting to know how your experiences differed in terms of numbers of women in your entering classes and how many of your female classmates who begin their respective programs continued in the school through ordination. Now, of course, we know that the class of 72 was not very diverse. It had one woman, Sally Prezand. Rabbi Schwartzman, can you tell us about the diversity in your class?
Hi, everyone. So pleased to be with you. And thank you to you, Sherry, and thank you to you, Lisa, for bringing us this wonderful program. As you heard, I was ordained in 1990, and at the time I was ordained, students at the college were only ordained in either New York or Cincinnati. I was ordained in New York. My class had 19 students, and 9 were women. Okay? 9 were women. And interestingly, because I was just showing off the photo of my classmates, and of the 9 women, almost none are in the pulpit right now. They're serving in different ways, but I'm trying to visualize my group. I think only a small percentage of the women who are ordained remain in the pulpit.
I'm going to touch on that.
Okay, I'll leave that out. And I know that Rabbi Stein will talk about the current layout of the Hebrew Union College, being closest to it now. But I will take this moment to interject that Temple Road Shalom currently has 5 students at the Hebrew Union College. 4 are women, 1 is a man. 1 is with us right now. Please rise. Erev Rav Fortney. Madeline, we're so glad you're here. We might call on you for an answer. I will also point out that our temple president, who's sitting, Lynn Lotenberg's daughter, will be ordained this year. I will point out that Hillel Weinberg's daughter, Sarah, was just admitted to the college, bringing our number of the Hebrew Union College to 6. I will point out that Carol Cohen's son is at the Hebrew College. Temple Road Shalom has 2 students at the Hebrew College, 5 students at the Hebrew Union College, 1 student admitted into, we'll count her in, and I do believe, well, I know that in terms of HUC, we are the congregation with the largest number of students at the college in the country or in the world. Here, here, Chapel Road Shalom, with a number of students poised to apply. Over to you.
As you heard, I was ordained in 2009, and I didn't do the numbers, but I know in New York, of the 15 of us who were ordained that year as rabbis in New York, I think there were 2 men. Rabbi Adam Rosenwasser, who's here in the area, senior rabbi of Temple Emmanuel, who was at Temple Sinai. There's a Temple Sinai thread here. And Rabbi Kevin Kleinman, who I think is in the Philadelphia area. And I remember distinctly that, I don't know if it was Kevin or Adam said that sometimes, this was after studying together for several years, we'd be talking about, you know, things like what kind of shoes are you going to wear, and that, you know, we hadn't thought that might not be comfortable for them, but we were not cognizant of the fact, you know, we were in the majority, and that was the case, I believe, across our class at the other campuses as well. So vast majority of people who were ordained the year that I was ordained are women. The year that I was ordained was right on the heels of the big financial crisis. If you remember 2008, 2009, not a good time to be looking for a job. So that colors a little bit, you know, the kind of jobs people were able to get. There were rabbis that didn't retire, who had planned on retiring and so forth. But I believe that most of the women in my class, if I'm just thinking about it, eventually did go to become congregational rabbis. Not everybody, but the majority.
So I was ordained in 2014 from the Debbie Friedman School of Sacred Music. So it's Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion, Debbie Friedman School of Sacred Music. So say that 10 times fast, and you can have also cantorial ordination. So we started out as 6 in my class. 3 men and 3 women who identified that way. And over the course of the 5 years, 2 of them left for various reasons, so we were 4 at the end. So a little bit different for cantors. Often the classes are a lot smaller, and we only go to the New York campus, which is the difference also with the rabbinical program. We're forced into West 4th Street, but this is the best school. It's the best one, right? And so we were half-half, but I will say overall, over like the course of kind of my 5-year time, there are vastly more women. And in the class right above me, there were 10 women. In the class 2 above me, there were 5 women. And then in the class when I was the second year, so 3 above me, there were 2 men and I think 3 women. So when we were forming our choirs, it was often a little difficult to find tenor and bass singers. We often had to pull from the faculty to make sure that we were like having an even sound. And to that note, I will say that the faculty at my time was vastly more men than women. Now that has changed, and it sounds like Sherry will touch on that, but I think that's just a specific thing for the cantors because we have that. And of my class, all 4 of us are, actually 3 of us are working in kind of traditional pulpit jobs, and 1 is the director of spiritual life at B'nai Jeshurun in New York, so he kind of leads a different path.
Hello, it's so lovely to be here with you all. So my class, when we started in Jerusalem, there were 45 people, and that was people going to be split between New York, LA, and Cincinnati, rabbinical, cantorial, and Jewish education. Our class in New York, the rabbinical and cantorial students together ended up being 20 when we were ordained. 12 of those were rabbinical students, and of that, this is so embarrassing because it's recent. I knew this would be a question. I believe that we were 4 men, 1 non-binary person, and 7 women. But if you Google us and I'm wrong, I apologize to my classmates. And the cantorial class A had 2 men and 6 women when we left school.
Okay. Cantor Rhodes, you touched on this. Oh.
It's about the recording.
Okay, it's all about the recording. Okay. Cantor Rhodes, you touched on this. I was going to ask about the percentage of male versus female professors in the school, and rather than asking each of you this, I thought, Rabbi Schwartzman, you lead the pack in terms of when you were ordained, and I'd be interested in hearing from Cantor Rhodes, because it's a cantorial school, how did that differ from what Rabbi Schwartzman is about to tell us?
In the year I was ordained on the New York campus, there was one adjunct woman professor who taught education who was not given tenure the year that I was there.
How did I figure
She was
that?
the
I'm
only
sorry.
woman in the rabbinic program.
Oh,
Do you want to say something about Aaron? Or do you want me, because that was Aaron Pinkham really pushed for women. Yeah.
he was wonderful.
So I wanted to mention Rabbi Aaron Pinkham of blessed memory, who was the dean of the New York campus and eventually the head of Hebrew Union College. But when he was in a position to bring faculty in, he was very concerned by the absence, the lack of female faculty, and so he made it. It was very important to him that female faculty members be added. And in fact, I should also know the numbers, but I would say probably maybe at the time I was there were 5. But again, if you Google the year and it's wrong, then. But these were tenured faculty members that he really, made it his business to bring in women faculty.
So at the School of Sacred Music, when I was there, basically they kind of divide the curriculum into 3 categories. You have like the text and history, which often we take with the rabbinical students, and then you have kind of the traditional canon of Jewish music, and then you have the modern canon of Jewish music, and they're taught by, of course, different faculty. So I would say overall in the kind of modern canon, it was mostly women teachers, maybe with 1 or 2 adjunct male faculty. And in the traditional canon, it was predominantly male teachers. Actually, this is an interesting little nugget that most of those teachers grew up in the traditional movements, either conservative or Orthodox Judaism, and made a specific decision to come teach at the college because they wanted women, and men as well, but they specifically were willing to teach women, even though theoretically it's kind of against their practice of Judaism, because they wanted to pass on the cantorial traditions and arts to all students becoming cantors. So in my time, it was mostly led by these men. Some of them have passed, others have retired, and now the school, it's kind of a different topic for a different time, is really in flux of who is taking on the mantle of teaching traditional Nusach to the students now. And the people who are teaching both are a little bit more varied and even in terms of gender identity.
Very good, thank you. Madeline, can you tell us, you are a third-year cantorial student. Introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Madeline Fortney, third-year rabbinical student on the New York campus. It is the best campus. Sorry to all my classmates in other places. But yeah, right now I would say that the faculty is evenly split with many women teaching a lot of my classes currently. So I think the landscape has changed so significantly. Yeah, a lot of women teaching right now. I don't know what else to add, but yeah. I'm sure you can also...
I would also say a lot, yeah.
Yeah.
Not just education.
Talmud.
And I suspect, Madeline, I suspect that they have tenure too.
I believe so.
Yeah. Okay. Times they are changing. Okay.
Madeline just said teaching everything from Talmud to education, if you're watching.
Wonderful.
You might have to come back up.
Thank you.
Just hey, good.
Thank you, Madeline. Amy, since Rabbi Schwartzman. Okay. Since you were there first among these women, of these women, did you perceive a difference in the attitudes of any of your professors? And I will address this to you as well, Rabbi Bernstein. Attitude differences by any of your professors with regard to gender or age?
That really works because I was in the percentage of students who came to the college right out of regular college. So I was on, like Madeline, I was young, and you were young at heart. I mean, right. I will say that I honestly did never felt a difference amongst my classmates as we learned from our professors. Age is another matter. I do think that I was aware. My class had a lot of people who were right out of college, but my experiences in terms of that kind of bias or whatever, it really came to light as soon as I began to apply to jobs. I really did not feel that from my professors.
Yeah, and thank you for asking the age question, Chair. I really appreciate that. I am
As
proud
an
to
older
say
person, I
was,
appreciate
Thank you. I was the oldest person in my cohort. I started when I was 53, and I was ordained when I was 58. Thank you, thank you.
Yay!
And I never felt anything but, you know, you're part of the group from the faculty. There were some funny things in terms of my classmates because, you know, rabbis and cantors as students are people too, and occasionally somebody would say, you know, a mild curse word, let's just say that. And if I were there, they would look at me like, and I said, you know, I've heard it before. It's not a big deal. And then the other issue in terms of age was was there still a touch, like a flag football team when there was a flag football team, and we consistently lost because we were the only team that fielded women. However, the reason I'm bringing this up is that they asked me to bring the oranges and the water. And I said, been there, done that. So I had to set some limits that, you know, that I was not the mom, but occasionally someone would say, is it okay if I ask you a mom type question? So that was that. And in terms of the faculty, there were no issues except when I got closer to ordination, a faculty member who will remain nameless, who I hadn't seen for a while, came to the New York campus and asked, you know, what are you doing in terms of a job? And I said, you know, it's a little bit challenging when you're a second career student. And this individual said, yep, you're in the absolute worst demographic group. But I appreciated that individual's honesty because that was an honest answer. Here at Road of Shalom, I never felt anything except we're so glad to have you. We're so grateful for what you bring. So it's finding the right place.
Okay, very good. Microphone. I imagine placements for women in your days were quite different from the placement process for Rabbi Presand. As a student, did you experience, and I'll say not only as a student, but upon ordination, did you experience congregational preferences based on gender or age? Okay, I'm going to start with Cantor Rhodes.
I don't think in terms of placement when I was a student, I had that experience. And I don't know, or either placement, any placement that I've been through, I don't feel like there has been that. However, often I hear something along the lines of, I only like female cantor voices, and I love, you know, it's always very kind. It's like, I love your voice, and I also like really prefer that. Or I always just only want male cantors, but you're pretty good, kind of, or like you've won me over kind of thing, which I find interesting. Like there's that additional level of timbre that comes into the story when you're presenting the musical piece of the service to the congregation, and there is some parts that play into preference, or, you know, oh, you sing very high, I can't sing along with you. And I'll say, actually, I'm singing the exact same key as Cantor Shaka, it's just an octave higher. So it's all about, how it's interpreted and heard, which is an interesting piece, too.
Rabbi Stein?
Yeah, I would say my classmates and I were pleasantly surprised that those of us who were cisgender women did not experience like, oh, but you're not a man. Like, I think that was a nice surprise of the placement process. I do think that one of the exciting things is that the rabbinate is getting more and more diverse in many ways, including around gender, that now there are more trans students, more non-binary students, more people of color, more people with disabilities who are public about having disabilities. And I think that those are kind of the next places for us to focus as a movement in terms of, are we embracing leaders of all identities? And like, if yes, great. And if not, what work can we do to make sure that we are?
Thank you, Rabbi Stein. You actually addressed my next question. So in the interest of moving forward, I will go forward. In what way do you believe the path of women on the Bema has differed from the path of other women forging their way into the originally male-dominated professions of law, business, and medicine, with issues such as glass ceilings or pink ceilings? Rabbi Schwartzman, I think you started to address the concept of the pink ceiling, with people no longer, women in your class no longer practicing. Was that a factor, or did they just change their minds?
Many of my classmates who are did not end up in congregational life. Many of them are serving in different capacities, but I think that not all congregational settings are accommodating to women, or weren't at that time. But before we began, Dr. Roberta Gartside and I were speaking about our own experiences, our varied experiences, because she's in the medical world. I know there are people here in the legal world, yourself included, of course. There are people here who are in the artisan world, who are artists. I think that everyone, I imagine every woman here has no less than a dozen stories to tell about what it was like to, even not long ago. So I've been in the congregation for 33 years. I've been in the community for 33 years. I'll go to a meeting not long ago, and someone will ask me, where do you work? Temple Road Shalom. Who's the senior rabbi? Who's the senior rabbi? I absolutely have found there to be, I think the experience in the rabbinate is very parallel to all the other professions, and that the women who are among us today, who are professionals working in government, whatever it might be, continually, we may be in the jobs, but the comments, the bias, the sort of assumptions, they remain. And the rabbinate is working hard on this, and to a large degree it's made great strides. But, I still have many stories to tell, even from our beloved own community, which I do love. And of course, Rosh Shalom, in so many ways, has been a leader by the way that this community has embraced the diversity of its entire clergy team, and yet,
and we're going to get to the end yet. Yes. Who else would like to address this issue? If you remember what the issue is.
I will also, when I was ordained, it was a very positive time to be a woman number 2. I had a lot of congregations invited me to come back to interview with them. Most were fairly open that they were concerned that I was at that time single.
You're getting ahead.
Oh, I'm getting ahead.
Okay, well, we're going to go
Microphone.
there, so you can actually comment on that, and we're going to go there. Go ahead and comment on that. And one of my questions actually was, lawyers advise their corporate clients all the time not to ask any illegal questions. Don't ask if they're married or single or if they plan on having children. And one would think that after Rabbi Prieson's ordination in 72, the movement would have advised its clergy teams and its, and lay leaders not to go there. But I suspect those questions continued to be asked for a very long time. So tell us if you were asked, if you were single, if you were planning to have a family, and what your personal preferences and interests were. Rabbi Schwartzman, we'll go down the line.
I wasn't directly asked, although, it doesn't take much to do a little poking and probing. But after I went through the placement process, 2 congregations let me know this was 1990, without really any sense of the inappropriateness of this, that they were worried that as a single person, I might find a partner and follow that partner. That these 2 congregations, both significant and were open about that is really shocking.
Yeah, I did have quite a few instances actually in the interview process of congregations. I interviewed at 8 congregations before I came here, this being one of the places. And not here, but good job. At least 3 or 4 other congregations, I was asked explicitly, are you married? Are you planning on having kids during your first contract? Those kinds of questions. I think it was a mixture of kind of well-meaning people who wanted to know more about my life and find out about my spouse and get to know if he would be happy there too, etc. And a mixture of like, are you going to be out for 3 months during the first 3 years, and are we going to have to manage that? So.
And I'll just add that I think a happy, pretty recent development is that because of work like the Women's Rabbinic Network's like work on equal pay stuff, as well as kind of interviewing fairness, when I went through placement, it was recommended that synagogues do kind of anti-bias trainings before they formed committees. And I think that has had a huge impact on sort of people at least knowing that that's not an appropriate question to ask. It still comes up because people say, oh, we're so glad you're coming to our community for a second round interview. Will your partner be coming, and can we show them around, right? So, right, I think that's where but I think that awareness of that has increased dramatically, and a lot of it has to do with these efforts that are education-based and sort of very much trying to spread wisdom that I think already exists in other fields in our country into the world of like Jewish professional life as well.
Thank you. Thank you. In deciding to become a rabbi or cantor, did any of you think about how your gender or age would affect your ability to progress in the field? And raise your hand if you're able to respond to this.
No, I guess I think I was very lucky in that I didn't, I grew up with one of the rabbis I grew up with was a woman, and she and the other rabbi I grew up with were both wonderful, he's a man, they're both wonderful rabbis. I think that I grew up as a gay person in a time period when it would have been hard to be like an adult gay rabbi who had a lot of job options. And I think I feel very lucky to be an adult in a pretty different world around that kind of stuff. But no, I think I benefited a lot from the work of people who came before me to make all of that much more possible.
Yeah, same. Yes, we all did, yes. Any other comments? Okay. Rabbi Schwartzman, How old were you when you first considered becoming a rabbi, and what attracted you to the rabbinate? Was your decision to enter the rabbinate a natural outcome of the way you were raised?
Thank you. That's a lovely question. I did not contemplate becoming a rabbi until I was in college. I grew up in a Reform congregation. I had a very active childhood engaged with the Reform movement by going to Reform summer camp. I was in my youth group, president of my youth group, very involved in my synagogue in Philadelphia. But I did not at that time consider becoming a rabbi. And in thinking back, I didn't even think, and maybe, I didn't even do the math like, there are no women rabbis, but I wasn't really even in that headspace. In my own congregation, the year I went to college, the congregation brought in a new assistant rabbi who was a woman. So that was pretty, that was 1980, 81, 80, I think, 81. There were that model was sort of hovering. But when I was in college, I got involved in student organization around religious communities. I was doing some social justice work. I went to college interested in studying biology, and then I took a religious studies course, and I thought, wow, this is my thing. I was a biology minor by the end, but I was a religious studies major. And in college, it sort of all clicked that all the things that I really loved doing were sort of the package of the rabbinate. And so when I was in college, I started really to think seriously about that. When I was in high school, the associate rabbi was Rabbi Jack Luxembourg, who just retired a few years ago from Beth Ami here in Rockville. So I went and met with him and talked about the rabbinate, talked to other rabbis, my home rabbi, Rabbi Max Hausen. I didn't have a woman rabbi to talk to. Even though I knew Susan Abramson was in the congregation, I hadn't really even met her. So I didn't really have that. But when I was in college, I was not a Judaic studies major. I was a religious studies major. That was intentional. But that's when I decided to become a rabbi, and it was really the realization that all these things, I have a piece of academics in me. I have my mother was a therapist. I was very inspired by being open to, touching people and listening and being a good listener. I loved just Jewish practices, and I did a lot of social justice work, and all that came together in this one package, and I thought, oh yeah, there you go.
Okay.
And there you are. And here I am.
I know you. Cantor Rhodes, did Jewish education, Jewish camping experiences, or community role models influence your decision to become a cantor?
Yes, absolutely. So many people who've influenced my life. Probably the first three, I would say, who kind of pulled me into the direction of the cantorate was my cantorial soloist, who actually is going to be on the Bima in May. She retired, and she's traveling around in her RV, and she called me up to say, can I come to Temple Rosh Shalom and be with you on a Friday night? So Holly Berman will be here, my childhood cantorial soloist. I'll put it out. I think it's the 19th of May. Anyways, she was wonderful. She did not go to cantorial school, but for various reasons. But she really encouraged me to think about it and pushed me in that direction, which was great. And then also my two high school choir teachers. One was very strict and had very high standards, and one was very sweet and had very high standards. And they kind of showed me what it can mean to put music in the center of your life and to have it bring a lot of rejuvenation and spirituality, and also have it be something that can be an intellectual pursuit as well. And I owe a lot to those three people.
Thank you. Rabbi Bernstein, what paved your way to the rabbinate? Who were the people in your...
Sorry, Sharon.
Who were the people in your inner circle who encouraged your interest in the rabbinate?
So I have to go back to the 1960s in Duluth, Minnesota. I was that kid. I was president of the youth group. I became active in NIFTY, the National Federation of Temple Youth. I was a regional officer. Before that, when I was 11, our rabbi in Duluth, Rabbi Shelley Gordon of blessed memory, called me into his office and said, you know, we really want to give you a scholarship to go to, at that time, a UAHC summer camp at Oconomowoc, Olansang, now it's Olansang Ruby Institute. My parents could not have afforded to send me, but they had identified me as someone that they wanted to send to this very special camp. And he said, and we hope that when you grow up, you will be a leader in your congregation. Because he couldn't say, you will be a rabbi, because there was no such thing. My mother used to say that I would make a great Rebbitzin. You know, right, exactly. So I knew that I didn't want that. But, you know, when I asked her about it years later, she said it was because I was so drawn to Judaism, it was so important to me. My parents were very active in the synagogue. My mom was a cantorial soloist. My dad was president of the Brotherhood. I mean, you name it, you know, they did it. So my interest in Judaism was always encouraged and supported, but there really wasn't a way forward for me at that time. But when that way opened up and when I thought I might take it, certainly my family, my husband, who married a clinical social worker and, you know, didn't realize that surprise, he was going to wake up one day and his wife was going to say, you know, I'm thinking of going to rabbinical school. So Henry was incredibly supportive, as was Rabbi Fred Briner, who's the emeritus at Temple Sinai, and wonderful friends. But it was not a possibility for me.
Thank you. Okay, this question is for all of the panelists. And we're going to start with Rabbi Stein and come down the line. Were there people in your sphere who tried to discourage you from becoming a woman on the pulpit, and what was their reasoning? Were those who supported your choice or discouraged your choice, male or female? Rabbi Stein.
No, I think I was very lucky. I think that my family was and is very supportive of me. My friends were as well, and sort of people I knew professionally. You know, so I think people in my life maybe knew more or less about what a rabbi was, especially if they weren't Jewish. But I think people were very warm with me, and I feel lucky for that.
Yeah, I would agree. Nobody was discouraging to me. Really lucky.
Same here. The only people who were discouraging was I wanted to teach 6th grade Hebrew as a way of sort of preparing myself for HUC, and my kids said, don't do it, the kids will be mean to you. But other than that, they were very supportive.
It's great that I joined the long line of people with supportive parents, and want to shout out to the Steins who are at the back, who represent all our parents who supported us. So Alexandra's parents, did you know they were there? We look to you as a supportive family that all of us are so grateful for. I had one cousin, my mother's first cousin. He was an older gentleman, and he said, like, how ridiculous. Why don't you become a social worker?
I knew there was somebody who was going to answer this question.
I won't say his name. May he rest.
How did being a rabbinic or cantorial student affect your personal lives? Rabbi Schwartzman, I know you were single before and after ordination. I have male and female relatives who were in that position. They encountered hesitation by would-be dates about getting involved with a rabbi. One of them was told, I'm not comfortable kissing a rabbi. Did you experience any of that?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I would say, I wish for all the rabbis out there, those who are looking to find partners, that they should find someone as wonderful as Kevin Moss.
Yay!
I know, he's not here right now, he's out of town, but he is so great. But indeed, people, to some people, I was a curiosity. And after they had all their questions answered, that was the end of the time together. For some people, it was an opportunity to sort of share all their own religious struggles. I'm looking to you guys, if you were already married, but, you know, to tell me about the rabbi of their childhood who they didn't like, or could they, you know, what they wanted to explore. And it was hard, and I did walk gingerly into sharing my professional work. You know, what do you do? I work in a synagogue. You know, I just don't need to get into it right off the bat. And as you all, I hope you all realize, it is not an easy life in terms of your time.
I'm gonna get
You're going to get there. So that was another piece of it. Does anyone else want to answer?
Rabbi Stein, why don't you answer? You are single. To what extent do you have these issues with people out there?
In your 6 months of being
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think that, I think people sometimes project onto religious leaders stuff that relates to their experience with religion, and I think that's true in dating and not in dating as well. You know, I'll let you all know if I get married. That's...
Rabbi Bernstein, unlike Rabbi Schwartzman and Cantor Rhodes, whose children were born after they were on the pulpit, you already had adult children when you entered rabbinic school. Did your kids have a reaction to having a mother change her career from being a social worker to rabbinics? Were their friends inquisitive about your career choice?
I don't know if their friends were. I think my friends were, maybe a little bit, but they were incredibly supportive. No, both Sarah and Joe were very, very supportive, and I think the main thing that they both worried about is that the year that I started rabbinical school was the end of the second intifada was, you know, kind of winding down, and I think they were concerned about my personal safety. So I promised them I wouldn't, you know, ride buses. You know, that's a number of the bombings had been bus bombings. So no, they've both been incredibly supportive. They did also tell me that I did not have to get straight A's, that this is, that I could be a good student without getting straight A's.
Cantor Rhodes, did your friends or suitors ask what it meant to be a cantor, and did they ask you to sing for them?
Well, luckily, I'm at Dovin College, so I didn't have to go through that difficulty of dating during this time. I will say, like, a little bit in reference to what you said, Alexandra, that just meeting people in general and finding friends, which is, of course, different, but still challenging, I think, as an adult in a suburban community, a young adult maybe, to find friends, that a lot of people are kind of interested and curious and don't really understand. And I do a lot of the, either I do like I'm a musician or I work in a synagogue. It kind of depends on the scenario and how deeply I want to go into like the Jewish piece. Or I say I teach sometimes. I just throw all sorts of things out there. I'm kind of rambling, but I think that answers the question.
We've all heard the expression that the psychiatrist kid is the nuttiest. So how would that analogy, you all heard that first part? Oh. We've all heard the expression that the psychiatrist kid is the nuttiest. So how would that analogy bode for a rabbi's kid? Rabbi Schwartzman, you have two accomplished daughters who remain in the fold. How did you and Kevin do this? Tell us about some of the issues you encountered as a woman rabbi with a husband who was not a Jewish professional, raising two daughters in this competitive environment where, among other things, Friday night and Saturday morning, sports have long been the norm.
First of all, the My first thing that comes to mind is Kevin. Simply, many of you know him, and he has been an exceptional he's been my exceptional partner and an exceptional person to have as a clergy partner, because he has such a fabulous relationship to Judaism and to his daughters as well. So I let him do a lot of the guidance about that. And yes, our kids, we had expectations of them in this building. We had expectations of our family as it related to the observance of Shabbat, and that wasn't always easy. I would have never predicted that both my kids I would have imagined that my kids would have taken a break from their Judaism, and I was really pleased that both of them have had very Jewish paths still, which is remarkable and not necessarily that common, because sometimes our kids need to take a break from that. But luckily they have different last name, so not every kid in the religious school knew that they were my children. That helped. But I mean, one thing was that our board meetings, executive board, regular board, and often committees are on Tuesday nights. So I pretty much would work every Tuesday night. And for a long time, I'd go home and have dinner with the kids, and then, and I'd come back, and they'd have this chant, and they would scream, "Don't go to the temple, don't go to the temple," when they were really young. I think my kids now have a lot of pride in their mom, and I have a lot of gratitude to Kevin for helping to be a presence while I was on the Bima. We expected our kids at Friday night dinner every week. They could go out after Shabbat dinner, but we had to have Shabbat dinner, and they could go to anybody's house who was having Shabbat dinner. So if they had a friend, if they were having Shabbat dinner, and then they were going somewhere, that was okay too. But we lived it and struggled with it. And our kids might be on the psychiatrist's couch sometime soon. I don't know.
Rabbi Bernstein, you were a high...
I think within the range of what we would call normal. The only
That's good. That's very good. Not too many people can say that. Rabbi Bernstein, you were a highly skilled and experienced social worker. You had lost a husband in a terrible catastrophe before you entered HUC. You yourself could have taught your HUC classmates the art of being an active listener and how to be an empathic counselor. What was it like for you to have to sit in pastoral counseling sessions with pastoral counseling classes with your relatively young and inexperienced classmates?
Okay. Well, they offered me the option of having some sort of study, figuring that I had, already had the basics. But what I realized is, although I was a psychotherapist, I didn't know what the role of clergy was, and I wanted to know. That was important to me, so I took all those classes. And I would say that one of the things I learned in rabbinical school is that age is not necessarily, advanced age, positively correlated with being a listener and being a caring person. So that is one of the most important things I learned in rabbinical school, is that age and wisdom and kindness and all those things are not necessarily positively correlated. So I felt that my classmates with whom I was in those classes were really eager to learn. They were eager to know, what are the boundaries? When is it time to refer somebody? And so I felt that I learned a lot from them, and also learned what the role of a rabbi, and Cantor's had to take rabbi and cantor is in those situations. So,
thank you. Cantor wrote, in traditional Judaism, the cantor, a chazan, was a man. Today, in liberal congregations, there are many, many women cantors. Can you tell us some of the ramifications of that change, both musical ramifications and other ramifications?
Yes. There's so much to say on this topic. It could only almost be its own kind of class or lecture. But in short, I'll say that the canon, especially of traditional Jewish music, was written specifically for tenor male voices. So it sits right in the part of the female voice that is both sometimes quite uncomfortable to sing in for extended period of time, and is quite uncomfortable to listen to for extended period of time. Not that women, of course in operas and whatever, the soprano soloist will sing many high notes, but if you listen carefully, and for those of you who are musicians, you'll know that it never sits constantly kind of in that like D to C range on the upper part of the scale. But cantoral music often did, and it had very complex runs that would be like right in the space in the female voice that switches from chest to head voice. So a lot of technical changes needed to be made just in terms of the key in which things were sung. And unfortunately, maybe it has changed now, but the music we were all presented, the sheet music, was in this original tenor key. So I spent a lot of time transposing things on the spot, a third lower, and trying to find the key for my voice, and met with some resistance by various professors here and there about changing the key at all. And no, this is the key, this is the way it was written, this is how it has to be done. But actually, historically, these pieces were recitatives that were improvised, and they were so fabulous and majestic that someone would kind of furiously write them down in the back of the room and then come to the chazan and say, is this the right run that you did? And they would work it, and then it would become canonized as written music. But it was never supposed to be like always done this way. And there were different professors who had various thoughts on this. So I will say that the female voice in traditional cantorial music has really brought a wider perspective of what can sound traditional to us, and like we would have heard in the 50s and 60s on the radio from the cantorial greats of that age. And then I'll also say that in the modern way that many women were more invested in putting out Jewish folk music and camp music than they were in the cantorate. So as soon as women began to become ordained or invested at the time, more in the from cantorial school, the outside group of women who were writing music in those movements kind of coalesced because women wanted to sing music that was written by women and felt good in their vocal range. And that's really when quote-unquote camp music became more common at the same time. So there's like a lot of movements happening at the same moment. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you. Very good. Very interesting. Here's a question for everyone. Why don't we start with Stephanie, with Rabbi Bernstein, and then Cantor Rhodes, and then Rabbi Stein, and back to Rabbi Schwartzman. What's the thing you wish your HUC education had prepared you for as a female, and that it failed to do? Do you think there's a better preparation for this today, or is this not a topic of concern anymore?
Somebody else want to go first? No, just kidding. I really can't. I'm trying to think. I can't think of anything. I mean, I feel that my preparation was quite good. So I don't have anything specifically that would address that.
I think there are things that the DFSSM left out, but I don't think they necessarily correlate to gender. Like, I would have loved to learn about how to make a budget, for instance. Yeah, that would be good. But otherwise, no, I don't think I have anything specifically to that point.
Yeah, I also don't have anything that correlates to gender. Other things, sure, but yeah.
I agree that there was plenty that I wish I had learned, like how to do a budget and things like that. But I will say that I think the school turned a blind eye to the reality of, and I can't believe they didn't imagine it was the reality, that women would experience bias in their congregations, and they certainly did not help us to be ready for the moment when someone comes up to the rabbi and says something inappropriate or something that alludes to, the woman rabbi, like, even these are unintentional things when someone says, what made you decide to be a woman rabbi? Well, first I was born female, then but also to the same theme, I really think that all of us were not trained about what allyship is, and certainly my male colleagues who care deeply about all of their classmates, I think, have had to learn on the go and are still learning how to be allies. And I think, Madeline, I'm thinking maybe you have something to say. I'm feeling some energy from you. Yes, do you want to share? Sure, we want you up here. You very much represent not only our community and the college and the future, along with others. So over to you.
Thank you. Well, what I neglected to mention when I first came up here is that I'm so thrilled to be here, and also, you, Rabbi Schwartzman, said that you didn't have any women rabbis to talk to when you were considering going through this process, and I just have to say that you were that person for me, as you know. And yeah, the synagogue and Rabbi Schwartzman are huge reasons why I am in rabbinical school today. So, props. In terms of, I would agree that there are things that can be lacking from rabbinical school education. Balancing a budget, that's why I'm getting my certificate in Jewish nonprofit management from the Zellico School. So shout out to the Zellico School for teaching us things that rabbinical school does not. But I think, I guess maybe I was nodding because the idea of allyship from classmates who aren't women is so important, and I think that we're making progress in that way, and I think I saw a lot of good examples of that. I didn't get to go to a year in Israel because of COVID, but I spent last summer in Israel, and I was impressed at the ways in which my classmates of all genders were there to be allies for us, specifically when we went to pray with Women of the Wall. There were classmates of all genders who came to support us and protect us, and so I think we've come a long way in that way, and also that's not something that we learn in school. I think that I have, as I said, many women professors who teach everything from education to pastoral care to Talmud to Bible, and I think that helps in terms of having a realistic expectation of what it's going to be like to sit in your seats and be a woman on the bima, but there's not necessarily any explicit moments of this is what you're going to experience. I think it becomes clear to myself and other classmates of mine when we start working in internships that people may not take you as seriously, especially as a young single woman on the bima. So that's very real. Yeah.
And I'll just to tag team on that quickly, a total delight that I have when I started working here that I hadn't experienced as an intern was that people said, you are a young woman. Rabbi Schwartzman was once a young woman. Like, maybe you can be a good rabbi, like she is a good rabbi. And that was just like a lovely, that's not a thing I had experienced before in terms of people's associations.
I was younger than you. I was 20.
Right. Okay. We have 2 or 3 more, but we'll be done by 3:30. Okay?
All right, then get on it. Get to it.
Rabbi Bernstein, do you believe there are advantages to being a woman in pastoral work with the congregation and in working with other clergy that might not be obvious to us?
I think that it has more to do with one's life experience, and I'm not so sure that I would say that there are advantages. I have so many wonderful male colleagues who bring empathy and warmth and you know, I don't think it's something that I would ascribe to gender. However, I think it is important, and I would second what Madeline said, and I'm so glad you're getting that master's degree in management, because the only way that I knew about a synagogue budget was because I had been the treasurer of Temple Sinai, and then the executive vice president who had to prepare the budget, and then the president of the congregation. And I think that's still a lack in our rabbinic and cantorial education, as is learning how to fundraise. I'll just put that in there.
Okay, people tend to tell foolish lawyer, doctor, and rabbi jokes. What was the most foolish joke you were told because of your status as a clergy person? In the alternative, what was the most offensive comment you received as a female clergy person? Rabbi Schwartzman.
I have so many to select from. What do you wear under that robe?
Ooh.
That's not a good question, but I do share that, and that was not that many years ago, sadly.
I don't have anything.
Okay, we are trying to wrap up. I'm going to jump to my last question. To all of you, do you think this type of panel discussion will be passé in 50 years from now, or hopefully even sooner? I say 50 years because women have been on the pulpit for 50 years. Do you think it'll be passé because women will have established themselves in the clergy, or in the alternative, because by then you believe society will accept gender equality, gender fluidity, and the reality of the existence of non-binary gender? All right. Pardon? Simple. Simple. Okay.
I guess I would say I hope so, and I also think we need to work to make that world possible. Like, I don't think it'll just happen on its own. But, you know, I think we can work to bring that into being hopefully much sooner than 50 years from now.
I would agree that I absolutely hope so. I might be a bit on the pessimistic side. I'm not sure a panel like this will necessarily bring new light onto our experience as women clergy, but I do think things perhaps like the gender pay gap will still be in existence. By the way, it's worse for cantors than rabbis. It's 84% for cantors.
Oh my God.
So it's not great. And I think it's a big jump to make in 50 years, but you never know. We'll work for it.
We have more work to do, but I'm optimistic.
I am optimistic that the face of congregations will continue to be more and more diverse. And I am optimistic that the institutions will work hard to do their part to be ready to welcome a more diverse community. I struggle with imagining that the experience of diverse clergy will be that much different. I think there's the biases of the world are very, very, very deep, and so that's a hard reality. But I think that the panel might not be necessary, you know, but the training and the desire to help to wish from clergy that their congregants and other people they encounter out there would shed biases and other prejudices. I doubt that's going to happen.
Thank you so much. I have enough questions to go another hour, but I think in terms of our need for a little champagne, I think we will move forward. Thank you all so much. And everybody.
Sherry, thank you for being our moderator, Sherry.
A quick question for you about your leadership.
I have to let you all know, I met with Sherry back in January and pitched this idea to her. Oh, I don't know, that's interesting. I am just amazed at the questions and the responses. We've really got to know a lot more about our clergy, the lives they've led, and what their vocations mean to them. And that shows in the work they do for us. And it makes me want to have a separate session with Cantor Shockett and Rabbi Sachs to pull them up here and say, okay, tell us your side of the story. Yes, I will ask them about their shoes. So we will ask them. So we're getting the champagne set up. If you'll be just a little patient, you're allowed to get up and everybody mingle, and eventually, the bottles are being poured now, so be a little patient out there, and there will be a toast. Thank you so much for showing up. Oh, and there will be, after the toast, there will be food. There has to be food, okay?